I woke up one day and my life wasn't mine anymore. Let me tell you how that happened. My name is David, and what I'm about to share with you is the kind of story that sounds too dark to be true, but it is. Every word is real. 3 months ago, I opened my eyes in a recovery room with a 6-inch scar running down my back and one of my kidneys gone. There was no accident, no tumor, no medical emergency that required surgery. When I asked the doctor what happened, he handed me a consent form. The signature line for the patient was blank, but right below it, signed in my mother's handwriting, was a line that said, "Guardian or legal representative." I'm a grown man. I don't have a guardian. 2 hours later, a detective walked into my room and asked me a single question. "Do you know where your kidney is?" I did. It was inside my brother, 2 floors below me, in the same hospital. Before I tell you how I ended up here, I need you to stick with me. This isn't just a story about family betrayal. This is about what happens when the people who raised you decide your body isn't yours to keep. Like this video, subscribe if you want to hear how everything fell apart, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now let me take you back 3 months to the day my brother received the diagnosis that changed everything. My family has always had one rule, spoken or not. My brother comes first. My father, Gerald, spent 35 years building a hardware business in our small Pennsylvania town before he retired. He's the kind of man who believes order is everything. Men work, women support them, and sons carry the family name forward. My mother, Linda, never had a job outside the house. Her whole identity was tied to being Gerald's wife and my brother's mother. I was always the extra piece, the supporting role in someone else's story. My brother Marcus is 3 years older than me. He's charming when it suits him, which usually means he wants something. In the last 15 years, he's had 6 jobs, each one lasting less than 2 years. Every time he failed, there was an excuse ready. Bad economy, difficult boss, bad luck, and every single time, my parents caught him when he fell. Meanwhile, I put myself through nursing school. I worked doubles for years, saved every dollar I earned, and bought a one-bedroom apartment in Philadelphia with my own money. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. My nursing license hung on my wall next to a dying plant that somehow refused to give up, kind of like me. Last Thanksgiving, I came home with news about a promotion to supervisor. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd be proud of me. My father looked up from his plate and asked if Marcus was coming this year. That was my celebration. There's something else you need to know about me. I'm the only one in my family with O-negative blood, universal donor. When I was 17, my mother mentioned it once. "Good thing we have David," she said. "He can give blood to anyone." I didn't think much of it back then. I should have paid attention to those words. 6 weeks before I lost my kidney, my phone rang at 2 in the morning. It was my mother, and she was crying in a way I'd never heard before. Not the soft tears she used when she wanted sympathy. These were real, raw, terrified. "It's your brother," she said. "He's in the hospital. His kidneys are failing." I drove 3 hours through the darkness to get there. Whatever had happened between us, he was still my brother. The diagnosis hit like a hammer. End-stage kidney disease. Both kidneys were dead. The reason? 15 years of heavy drinking, the kind of drinking my parents had always dismissed as him just blowing off steam, just a phase he was going through. That phase had destroyed his body. When I walked into his hospital room, Marcus looked gray and diminished, nothing like the golden child I'd grown up resenting. Tubes connected him to a dialysis machine, doing the work his kidneys couldn't do anymore. On his wrist was a Rolex watch. Fake, I knew, but expensive. A gift he'd bought himself with money our parents had given him. My father stood at the foot of the bed like a general surveying a battlefield. "The doctors say he needs a transplant within 3 months," he said, "or he won't survive." 3 months. The transplant waiting list takes 5 to 7 years on average. My mother was clutching her rosary beads, praying silently. Then she looked at me, then at Marcus, then back at me again. Something cold settled in my chest. The way they were looking at me, it wasn't worry, it was calculation. My father's eyes held mine for a long moment before he turned back to my brother. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. In that moment, I understood. I wasn't his son anymore. I was inventory. I woke to pain that didn't make sense. Not the kind you understand, but something deeper. Something wrong. Like my body was screaming in a language I couldn't quite decode. White ceiling tiles, fluorescent lights, the steady beeping of machines. A recovery room. I tried to sit up and fire exploded across my lower back. My hand found bandages, thick gauze, medical tape, a surgical wound. What happened? My mind reeled backward through fragments. The examination room, the water they gave me, the dizziness creeping in, my father's face in the doorway, expressionless. Oh God, I'm a nurse. I've assisted in hundreds of surgeries. I know exactly what a 6-inch incision on your flank means. I know what it means when you wake up with that deep, hollow ache where an organ used to be. I pressed the call button. A young nurse appeared, nervous, avoiding my eyes. "Miss Reynolds, you're awake. I'll get the doctor." "What surgery did I have?" My voice came out raw. "What did you do to me?" The doctor will explain everything. I'm a nurse. I know what this incision is. She looked at the floor, the monitors, anywhere but at me, and left without answering. I lay there with one hand pressed against the bandages, staring at the ceiling. I already knew, but I needed to hear someone say it out loud. I needed to see the proof. I needed to know exactly what my family had done. Dr. Howard Mercer walked in like he expected gratitude. 60 years old, silver hair, confident smile, the look of a man who'd spent decades being respected. His white coat was pristine. "Miss Reynolds," he said, settling into the chair beside my bed. "Good to see you awake. The procedure went beautifully. Your brother is recovering well, and your kidney is already functioning in his body. You should be very proud. I didn't consent to any procedure." His smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course you did. Your guardian did on your behalf. I don't have a guardian. I'm 34 years old." He pulled out a consent form, standard hospital issue, the kind I'd seen hundreds of times. The patient's signature line was blank, but my mother's name was signed on the guardian line. "Your mother signed as your medical guardian," he said, as if this explained everything. "Given your condition." "What condition?" "Your parents explained that you have cognitive difficulties, that you're unable to make complex medical decisions." I stared at him. "Dr. Mercer," I said slowly, "I'm an operating room nurse with 10 years of experience. I have a bachelor's degree and multiple professional certifications. I live alone, manage my own finances, and I hold a job that requires me to make life or death decisions every single day." His face went pale. "This signature has no legal standing," I continued, holding up the form. "Under federal law, performing surgery without informed consent on a mentally competent adult is assault and battery. I'm looking at evidence of a felony." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. My parents arrived an hour later with expensive lilies from downtown, wrapped in cream-colored paper. My mother carried them like an offering. My father walked behind her, hands in his pockets, looking around the room like he was inspecting a property. "There's our girl," my mother said, setting the flowers on my bedside table. "How are you feeling?" I looked at her. The woman who had pushed me on swings, braided my hair for school photos, sat beside my bed when I was sick. The woman who had signed a piece of paper that let strangers cut me open. "You took my kidney." Her smile didn't waver. "Oh, honey, we saved your brother. You were part of something beautiful. Without asking me, without telling me, you drugged me and let them cut out my organ." My father stepped forward. "Don't be dramatic. It's done now, and Marcus is going to live. You should feel good about that. I should feel good." "You're a young man," he said, and his voice had that tone, the one he used when explaining something obvious to someone slow. "No wife, no children. What did you need 2 kidneys for? Marcus has a real future, and I don't." He shrugged. "You're a son. Sons sacrifice for their families. That's how it works." My mother nodded. "We knew you'd understand eventually. You just needed a little push." I looked at them, really looked. I searched for guilt, for shame, for any sign they understood what they'd done. There was nothing. They believed they were right. They believed I owed them this. In that moment, I realized something that broke me and freed me at the same time. I had never been their son. I had always been their spare parts. After they left, satisfied and smiling, certain they'd done nothing wrong, I lay in the dark for a long time. The machines beeped. The IV dripped. I thought about letting it go. I thought about what fighting would cost me. The lawyers, the accusations, the family that would call me ungrateful, vindictive, cruel. I thought about Marcus recovering with my kidney inside him, living because they'd taken a piece of me without asking. And then I picked up my phone. The hospital hadn't taken it. Why would they? I was supposed to be a willing donor, a loving brother. I dialed 911. "I need to report an assault," I said. My voice was steady. I'd found clarity on the other side of despair. I was brought to Riverside Medical Center under false pretenses. I was sedated without my consent. While I was unconscious, a surgeon removed my kidney. I repeated it all for the dispatcher. My parents signed a consent form claiming to be my legal guardians. I am a 34-year-old mentally competent adult with no guardians. This is organ theft. This is a federal crime. 2 hours later, a woman in a dark blazer walked into my room. Detective Vivian Carter, FBI, Healthcare Fraud Unit. She was about 45, close-cropped gray hair, a face that gave nothing away. She sat in the chair where the doctor had sat and pulled out a notebook. "Miss Reynolds," she said, "I have one question for you. Do you know where your kidney went?" "Yes. It's inside my brother. Room 412, 2 floors down." She wrote it down, then looked up. "Tell me everything." I walked into that courtroom in a navy suit I'd bought just for this day. The subpoena had my name in black letters, summoning me to testify in United States versus Reynolds. Today I would sit in front of a federal judge and tell him what my family had done. I would look at the people who raised me, who claimed to love me, and explain how they'd drugged me, cut me open, and stolen a piece of my body. Detective Carter had warned me the defense would try to paint me as unstable, vindictive, someone scorning her loving family. I knew. You can't get emotional. You can't raise your voice. You have to be calm, factual, and unshakable. I'm a nurse. I've held people's hearts in my hands while surgeons repaired them. I could handle this. The federal courthouse loomed against a gray November sky. Columns, marble steps, flags snapping in the wind. News vans lined the street. The story had leaked. Local family accused of organ theft. I walked past the cameras without looking. Whatever came next, I would face it head on. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No jury, just a judge, the attorneys, and the defendants. But the gallery was packed. Reporters filled the back rows, their notebooks open. A few colleagues from the hospital sat scattered throughout. And at the defense table, my family. My father wore a blazer I'd seen 100 times, navy blue, slightly tight across the shoulders. He sat ramrod straight, jaw clenched, radiating the same stubborn certainty he'd had my entire life. Even facing federal charges, he looked like a man who believed he'd done nothing wrong. My mother sat beside him in black, as if attending a funeral. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. And Marcus was pale, thinner than I'd ever seen him. He stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. The kidney inside him, my kidney, was keeping him alive. The judge entered. Everyone rose. This court will come to order. We are here for the preliminary hearing in the matter of United States versus Gerald Reynolds, Linda Reynolds, Marcus Reynolds, and Howard Mercer. The gavel fell, and I felt something settle inside me. Not peace yet, but certainty. They had operated in shadows and lies, assuming I would stay quiet, stay small, stay the obedient son they'd always expected. But here, there were no shadows. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Diane Walsh, stood near the witness box. Miss Reynolds, can you describe your relationship with the defendants? They're my family. Gerald is my father, Linda is my mother, Marcus is my older brother, and prior to October 14th of this year, how would you characterize that relationship? Complicated. I was never the priority. That was always Marcus. Can you tell the court what happened on October 14th? I walked through every detail. The diagnosis, the pressure to donate, my refusal, the silence that followed, the anonymous complaints to my employer, the family checkup that was actually a trap. I described waking up in recovery with stitches in my back and a missing organ. I described the consent form with my mother's signature. I described my parents bringing flowers and telling me I should be grateful. The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped writing. When I finished, the prosecutor asked one final question. Miss Reynolds, when you discovered your mother had signed as your guardian, what did you think? I looked at my parents. My mother's hands were shaking. My father's jaw was tight. I thought, for the first time in my life, I saw them clearly. A long pause. I thought I finally understood what I was to them. Not a son, not a person, just parts. Spare parts for the child who mattered. The words hung in the air. Somewhere in the gallery, I heard someone crying. I kept my eyes forward, calm, factual, unshakable. The defense attorney was a silver-haired man named Richard Hartley who specialized in making victims sound like villains. Miss Reynolds, he said, approaching the witness box, isn't it true you've struggled with emotional regulation in the past? No, I've been employed as an operating room nurse for 10 years with exemplary performance reviews. He pulled a paper from his folder. I have here a complaint filed with your hospital's HR department, filed anonymously by my father using his personal cell phone. The FBI traced it. The courtroom murmured. Hartley's smile flickered. Isn't it possible your family simply wanted to help you make a medical decision you were unable to make yourself? Before I could answer, a voice thundered from the defense table. She owes us. My father was on his feet, face purple with rage, jabbing a finger in my direction. I fed her, clothed her, kept a roof over her head. The judge's gavel cracked. Sit down. She's a daughter. Daughter sacrifice. That's how it's always been. Two bailiffs moved toward him. My mother pulled at his sleeve, crying. My father kept going, screaming, veins bulging. You think you're better than us? You're nothing. You're spare parts. That's all you've ever been. The bailiffs forced him back into his chair. The courtroom went dead silent, and I sat perfectly still, letting his words echo. He'd said out loud what they'd always believed. Now everyone knew. After a recess, the prosecutor called for evidence. A large screen wheeled into the courtroom. Your Honor, Diane Walsh said, the prosecution would like to enter a series of emails recovered from the defendant's personal accounts. The first email appeared. Linda, I talked to Mercer. He says if we can document Thea as mentally incompetent, we can sign as guardians. We need to move fast. A murmur swept through the gallery. The second, make the appointment at Mercer's hospital. Tell her it's a family checkup. Don't mention anything else. My mother's hands flew to her mouth. The third, make sure she doesn't bring her phone inside. We don't want any recordings. The fourth, Howard confirmed he'll accept the guardian consent. The fee is $50,000 to his foundation. And finally, Marcus's email. Thanks, Dad. This is the only way. She owes us anyway. The prosecutor let the silence stretch. These emails demonstrate clear premeditation. The defendants planned this surgery weeks in advance. They deliberately deceived you. They paid a medical professional to participate in an illegal procedure and created a false paper trail to discredit their victim before she could even report the crime. She turned to the judge. This is not a family making a difficult medical decision. This is conspiracy. This is fraud. This is assault. The judge looked at my family. My father stared at the wall. My mother cried silently. Marcus hadn't lifted his head since my father's outburst. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said slowly, "This court finds sufficient cause to proceed to trial." The gavel fell and I exhaled for the first time in months. 2 weeks later, Detective Carter called. Dr. Mercer took a deal, full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. He's testifying against your family. We met at the FBI field office that afternoon. The deposition transcript was thick, 50 pages of Dr. Mercer explaining exactly how my family had approached him, what they'd said, what they'd paid, but it was page 43 that stopped my heart. Was this the first time Gerald Reynolds approached you about a family organ donation? No. Approximately 10 years ago, when Marcus had a health scare involving his liver, Gerald contacted me. He asked whether it would be possible to procure a liver segment from his daughter without her explicit consent. And what was your response? I told him it wasn't possible. The oversight was too strict. Did he indicate he would pursue other options? He said, and I quote, "Keep her in mind. She's my backup plan." 10 years ago, when I was 24, just starting my nursing career, proudly independent, my father was already calling me his backup plan, his insurance policy, spare parts he could cash in whenever the real child needed them. He'd planned this for a decade. Detective Carter nodded. At minimum, I thought about all those years, the holidays I'd shown up to trying to earn their approval, the dinners where I was invisible, the birthday cards I sent that were never acknowledged. I had been auditioning for a part in a family that had already cast me as something else. A letter arrived from Marcus, handwritten from federal detention. "Dear, I don't expect you to read this. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't know. I knew there was a plan. I knew Dad had talked to a doctor. I told myself it would be fine, that you'd understand eventually, that you'd forgive us because we're family. I didn't let myself think about what the plan actually meant. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want answers. That's not innocence. That's cowardice. Your kidney was already inside me before I could take it back. I told myself I'd find a way to make it right. I haven't. I can't. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I knew what they were doing was wrong, and I let it happen because I wanted to live. You didn't owe us anything. You never did. I'm sorry, Marcus. I read it twice, then I put it back in the envelope. He wanted absolution, wanted me to write back saying I understood, that I forgave him, that blood was thicker than betrayal. I thought about the email he'd sent my father. She owes us anyway. I thought about the years he'd taken everything while I worked double shifts and built a life from nothing. I pulled out a notepad and started to write. Then I stopped. Some things don't deserve a response. I threw the notepad away and made myself dinner. He would live with my kidney inside him. He would live knowing where it came from. That was enough. The trial took 4 months. 4 months of testimony, evidence, cross-examination. 4 months of watching my family's lawyers try to paint me as unstable, vindictive, a son who couldn't accept his parents' love. It didn't work. The emails were too damning, the medical records too clear, Dr. Mercer's testimony too specific. On a gray morning in March, the verdict came down. Guilty, all counts, all defendants. 1 month later, I returned to the federal courthouse for sentencing. The courtroom was fuller than before. The case had made national news. Camera crews lined the steps outside. I sat in the gallery and watched the judge read from his prepared statement. "Gerald Reynolds, this court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison." My father's face didn't change. He'd been stoic throughout, convinced until the very end that he'd done nothing wrong. "Linda Reynolds, this court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison." My mother collapsed into tears, real ones this time, the ones she'd saved for when the performance no longer mattered. "Marcus Reynolds, this court sentences you to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation." Marcus looked at me for the first time since the trial began. I couldn't read his expression. Regret, resignation. I didn't care anymore. "Dr. Howard Mercer, this court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison with permanent revocation of your medical license." The gavel fell one final time. Guards led them away. My father first, then my mother, then my brother. One by one, the people who had raised me disappeared through a side door. I sat in my seat until the courtroom emptied. Then I stood, walked outside, and felt the sun on my face. It was over. A year later, my apartment has more windows now. I moved to a 2-bedroom on the top floor of a building flooded with light. Plants line the windowsills. Pothos, snake plants, a fiddle leaf fig I've somehow managed to keep alive. A gray cat named Oliver sleeps in the sunbeam by the door. I'm still a nurse, but I'm a charge nurse now. The promotion came through 6 months after the trial. My colleagues threw me a party in the break room with a cake that said, "Congratulations, boss." Nathan gave a toast that made me cry. Once a month, I attend a support group for survivors of family abuse. We meet in a church basement, drink terrible coffee, and share stories that would break most people. They don't break us. My kidney function is monitored regularly. The remaining one is healthy, doing the work of two without complaint. The scar on my back has faded to a thin silver line, visible if you know where to look, invisible if you don't. The restraining order against my parents and Marcus is permanent. They're not allowed to contact me directly or indirectly for the rest of their lives. Not that they would. My father hasn't spoken to me since his outburst in court. My mother sends letters sometimes to my old address. I return them unopened. Marcus stopped writing after I never replied. I don't miss them. That surprised me at first. I'd expected grief, longing, some ache for the family I'd lost. But you can't lose something you never had. What I had was a role in their story, the spare son, the backup plan, the parts they could harvest when needed. Now I have my own story, and it's mine. No one else's, just mine. I'm sitting in my favorite coffee shop as I tell you this. It's a Tuesday afternoon. Sunlight streams through the windows. My journal is open on the table. The first page still says what I wrote the day I moved into my new apartment. My body, my story, my rules. I won't pretend the past 2 years have been easy. Some nights I still wake up reaching for a scar that's no longer tender. Some days I see a family in the grocery store and feel something twist in my chest. But I don't regret what I did. I don't regret calling the police. I don't regret testifying. I don't regret watching the people who raised me walk into prison cells. Because here's what I've learned. Blood relation doesn't give anyone ownership of your body. Being family doesn't mean being entitled to pieces of you. Not your organs, not your time, not your sanity. The people who love you don't drug you and cut you open. They don't forge documents. They don't spend a decade thinking of you as spare parts. And if someone treats you that way, even if they share your DNA, you are allowed to walk away. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them forgiveness. You don't owe them anything at all. I close my journal and finish my coffee. Outside, the world keeps moving. People pass on the sidewalk living their own stories. I'm one of them now. Not a victim, not a cautionary tale. Just a man who learned the hardest way possible that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is let go of the people who hurt you. If that's where you are, if you're sitting in your own story, wondering if you have permission to leave, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me. You do. You always did. 3 things I want to leave you with. First, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to justify why you won't sacrifice yourself for someone else. Second, document everything. When something feels wrong, write it down. Save the emails, screenshot the texts. Paper trails save lives. Third, love has boundaries. Real love respects your body, your choices, your autonomy. Anything else isn't love. It's ownership. That's my story. If it helped you, hit subscribe. If you know someone who needs to hear it, share this video. And if you've got your own story, I'm listening. Drop a comment, tell me where you're from and what you're going through. Take care of yourself.